this afternoon.
Clearly.
The mood in the room's a little subdued, but we're going to bring it up today with our energy. So with that being said, I'm going to go down the line and give a bit of an introduction for each of you. What do you do, where you're investing, and give the crowd a bit of a taste of, what's your special sauce?
Well, I'll go first. Thanks for coming by. My name is David Koh. I'm with Capital Stack Investments. I do infill construction in Los Angeles, and I know everyone thinks that's crazy, but what we try to do is try to find a complicated process and do it simply. And for us, what we really try to do is build by right, which we'll talk about today. So I think that's our special sauce, is trying to take a complicated process and figure out a way to do it simply.
Right, and I definitely want to talk about buy right. We're going to use a few buzzwords today that I will make sure that the panelists don't get too, buzzwordy with you, so we can make sure we're breaking it down into the parts and so you can all understand. But Lika, tell us a little bit about what you do, where you're investing, and what's your special sauce.
Okay, so I'm Lika, and I own a company called Rehabit Homes, and I largely play in the Seattle, Washington market. I am into a lot of reconstruction, both single family and commercial properties, and construction's just been my jam. I have done over 75 deals or so in my market. So, yep.
Nice. Oh yeah, Aaron Saunders with Spartan Investment Group. I'm the managing director of Spartan Construction Management, which is an internal general contractor that we stood up last January. And I was brought in to really build out a team so that we can manage our own construction companies, or our own construction projects. We focus in secondary, tertiary markets and focus on value-add self-storage.
And the reason what I love about this panel is that we have a myriad of different construction processes in terms of ground up. We've got remodeling, and we've also got secondary and tertiary markets in regards to building self-storage with Aaron. But guys, give me a bit more of an in-depth look at what you do. Maybe give us an example, a snapshot of the last deal, and I'm going to start with you, Aaron, on the end, of what your ground-up construction process was, and try and break it down into its parts for the people that understand, so they can understand a little bit better.
Yeah, so we've got quite a few different projects going on right now. I think we have 20 or so in the pipeline in different stages of construction, but really, if we start in the very beginning, it's our construction team that's supporting the acquisition side. So as soon as our acquisitions team identifies a property, they'll look at, hey, what can we do with this additional land out here? What's the highest and best use for this additional land? And our team will put together some budgetary numbers for them. We'll go to site, we'll investigate that, and then we really start digging into the details with the jurisdiction and understand, what are the requirements to build here? Is it a by right project? Do we need to go through a conditional use permit process? And then we kind of move in through the estimating phase and work through that. So right after I hired on last January, we identified a property in Huntsville, Texas. We went through the conditional use process there, so we had an engineer draft up some initial layouts for us. We got in front of the planning department and got their support, ultimately went in front of the city council and got their support from it as well, and passed that conditional use permit through. There were a couple conditions that the city wanted around that, and you'll typically see that they want to have different things that make sure that the new development kind of fits in with what the existing city has going on. And then because we had so many acquisitions last year, that project kind of has been working its way through the process. But we just signed a contract with our building contractor there, or building supplier, and we're going out for bids for civil contractors, and we'll be breaking ground on that project in the next couple months.
Awesome. And three buzzwords there: highest and best use, conditional use permit, and by right. So all those things you'll need to get to know when you're getting into the ground-up development space. And we've only got 30 minutes here, so we can't get into a whole 101 of ground-up construction, but definitely ask these guys after this panel about those specific topics, because it's very important to understand that before going and putting a piece of dirt under contract. So Lika, tell me a little bit more about what you're doing in your highest and best use in the Seattle market, because it's a little bit different to what Aaron's doing.
Yeah, okay, so in my market, it's super hard to do ground up because just the permitting process takes such a long time. We're waiting on permits for 2 years for ground up. And so just to maximize on every deal, what I do is reconstruct projects, so work from what's already in the project and then work it out. And so what my projects, I have about 14 units that I'm remodeling right now. And for me, the process is simple, or simpler than Aaron's. We start with the architect going out, getting plans. Then we redesign houses, apartment buildings, offices. And then that plan goes to the city. And then, of course, that takes forever, but 4 to 6 weeks to get permits. And once we have permits, then we can start construction. And then at every phase, we have to go through inspections until we get an occupancy permit. I think the whole process for me takes about 6 to 8 months. So we try not to go too deep, but it's almost inevitable with how old our houses are and how much construction work goes into it. And they're all like structural engineering, so it's not, when you think of a flip, you think cosmetic. These are more like hardcore reconstruction projects.
Got it. David, I would imagine Seattle, and knowing Los Angeles very well, I live in Los Angeles, I've done ground up construction in Los Angeles, there'd be a similar type of approval process. So walk us through what you're doing in LA that's maybe slightly different to what Lika's doing.
So, yeah, I mean, California is probably one of the most complicated states to build in, as you know, and probably the biggest thing that I think we've learned, and we've done a lot of commercial type of ground up construction. You know, we like value add, and we love multifamily, so we're definitely building homes. We're building places for people to live. Anyone you've heard talk today, especially on the economic side, we've got some, serious underdevelopment that's been happening for the last, 20 years all over the country. But in California, it's exacerbated because of the difficulty in actually having to build. So what we did is our moment where, after doing and trying to figure out how do we build these more complicated projects faster and simpler, is we actually figured out what is the simplest way to create housing in California. And when you get into development, what you'll find is that whether you're building residence or a single family versus commercial, it's a different set of rules, right? So the residential side, 1 to 4 unit, is way easier. The permitting process is easier. There's separate inspectors for the residential versus the commercial. The requirements that you have to build to are simpler in residential versus commercial. But owning commercial a long time is kind of where the magic is, right? You get better debt, you get, it's easier to hold commercial a long time versus non-owner occupied residential. So what we're doing is we've identified, in the city of Los Angeles, which is the city that we're building in, there are 40,000 lots that have single-family homes that are zoned for multifamily. We've got a 4-unit box that is kind of pre-approved by the city of Los Angeles. They like our structural, they like our engineering plans, they've seen it before, and we only chase lots that our box fits on, right? So when I said buy right, what buy right means is that we are only going to ask the city to approve something that's already in the code. There's no questions about it. There's no, you can't go through and argue with it. If the neighbors don't like it, tough. There's no process on the residential side for them to protest it. As long as we're building what's by right, what's allowed by right, we can build our project. So we chase down these lots and we call residential homeowners that have a single family home zoned on these multifamily lots. And then once we buy them, we build then our 4-unit, which is a very simple thing to build. It's all wood construction, no steel, limited engineering. We don't have a lot of architectural plans. Really all we're doing is trying to figure out how our box fits into the architecture of the piece of land, how it plugs into the plumbing and the sewer and the water and everything else. And then we can build them very, very quickly. So, and then once we get our 4-unit box completed, we then convert one of the garages to an ADU, which is basically adding a 5th unit, which now means we qualify for commercial. So we'll go into it as residential, go through the 1 to 4 residential code, add the 5th unit as the ADU, and then rent out all 5 units and take it out as commercial. So we kind of get the best of both worlds where we can do it quickly on one side, but we get that long-term advantage of owning commercial.
And buy right is very key here. And so, David, you've just explained it quite clearly, and thank you very much. You're only doing buy right. Lika, are you doing anything that's not by right that requires more arduous process? No? Aaron?
We definitely are.
You
yeah.
do? Okay, so let's talk about that for a second, because the biggest thing that people get involved with ground up construction is that risk. So how do you mitigate that risk going in as a buyer to say, well, it's a bit of a crapshoot. I don't know if the city's going to approve my non-by right project. So what are you doing on the Spartan side to reduce that risk for investors?
Yeah, so if I go back and look at the Huntsville project that I talked about earlier, that project, while it was still under contract before we closed, we went through that CUP process. So we invested resources, we invested dollars with a little bit of engineering and our time to get down there and get in front of the planning department, get in front of the city council and make sure that we could expand on that property. Some of our other properties, we underwrite existing facilities with expansion potential, but we really make sure that that existing facility is going to meet the needs of our investors first. And then if we can build on it, that's a bonus to our investors.
What's typically the time range? Because so that was key, but no one picked that up. Aaron is negotiating with the seller of the land to not close on the contract until he's got local city approval, correct? So how long does that period take?
Yeah, every jurisdiction is different, so it's pretty well mapped out on their website, and you can download the documents.
6 months, 12 months?
Yes, so that process I think took us maybe 4 months on that property. Some of them are longer, some of them are shorter, but they talk through that process. Hey, we only have these meetings on the third Tuesday of every month, so make sure your drawings are in on the second Tuesday of the month, so we have 1 week to review them before, or you're going to get pushed 1 month out. So once we identify a property, we go through and we pencil out what does that flow chart look like of the approval process, the conditional use or special use permit process, and then we identify those dates. Like, these are our hard dates when we need to get in front of planning department, when we need to schedule our meeting with the city council, just so that we don't miss them and then potentially have to push the contract closing date or risk losing the project.
Which, by the way, in California, that project, that's a 12 to 18 month project before COVID. Right? Now with COVID and the city has disappeared working from home, that's now a 24 to 36
Multiple
month
review periods.
project.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Lika, that would be the same in Seattle, right? Like a non-by right project going through the city would probably take about 18 months?
Yeah, I would say about 18 months. It depends on the scope. If it's just like a simple, like reconstruction scope, then it's about 4 to 6 weeks. If you get red tagged, which is a whole other situation, which is if you don't pull permits on a project and then the city catches that you're remodeling this project and you don't have permits, then they just make you, give up your first barn. And, and then that process could take about 8 months just to get your permits.
So guys, if you're interested in ground up construction and you want to do something that's not by right, you really have to understand what the city approval process is, and every municipality will have it hopefully spelled out quite well on their website, but make sure you're going through that process, you're getting the team, you're understanding before you're getting a deal under contract.
And I'd even add, beyond their website, go talk to the city. The cities are always really good. You can go talk to a planner about, hey, look, I want to do project X. Your website says why, what's actually happening, because what the city actually does and what their website says may not always align. So that's a really big tip, is before you even, one of the first things you want to do in due diligence is go talk to the municipality, the city, see what they say before you start really spending a bunch of time on due diligence.
And a bunch of money.
And a bunch of money,
So let's quickly pivot now to, you just mentioned, Dave, about the approval process taking longer in these cities with a lot of congestion to get things approved, particularly LA. I know how arduous it is. Texas is a lot easier. Seattle is probably very similar to LA. Have you seen it blown out post-COVID?
Yeah, so my best example of our public government gone awry is we had to go through and redo some plans for one of our projects. This is not one of the projects we're building right now. This was something that was a more complicated project. Our architect actually delivered plans. Well, in the city of LA, things that used to be over the counter no longer exist. The city's still working from home. So there's wicker baskets spread out in the planning office that you literally put your plans in.
Oh my God, same.
Right? And then you leave and you hope at some point in time someone gets your
picks
plans.
it up.
So, you start calling, 3 weeks went by, 4 weeks went by, 6 weeks went by. We finally got a hold of someone and the city admitted they lost our plans. And actually, they didn't admit it. They said we never submitted them. Now, luckily, being good people we are, we took a photo of our plans in their wicker basket before we dropped them off, and we're like, no, you lost them. Here's a photo of it. But we then had to go back, and we had to redo plans and resubmit them. Now, we went on the top of the stack the second time around, but that's what it's like dealing with the city. So for us, minimizing the amount of time you have to deal with the city is really, the thing that we're trying to do now is find ways around that. I'd say probably the biggest thing is, on the inspection timelines, and we all deal with this, when you call for inspection, right, make sure, right, that it's ready, right? Don't call them out saying, well, you know what, they'll probably find a few things, because when they come in and find one thing, they're going to find 10 things, right?
Oh my God.
So,
Yeah.
that's another thing that we've really done is before we actually call for whatever phase of inspection we're in, is we really want to make sure that the contractor is really ready for inspection. Better to push it off 2 days and maybe only get a couple of things, versus trying to rush it, get them in, and then, now all of a sudden you've got 2 weeks of work to do to get ready for that reinspection.
Right. Let's quickly pivot now to cost of construction. Everyone wants to understand how cost of construction has been changing, supply chain. I'm actually doing a whole talk tomorrow on supply chain. But let's start with Aaron, because I know, give the audience what you're building your lovely self-storage products for on a price per square foot basis, so we can all write this down and then use it on our underwriting calculations in the future.
There you go, yeah.
And we'll hold you to it if it's
$2.
being videotaped.
That's a pretty wide spread, so I think I'm covered. But we have projects ranging from like mid-50s, some sub-50s, all the way up to $160 a square foot. So it really just depends on the county that we're working in, soil conditions, slope of the lands. What are we building? Are we building single-story, drive-up, non-climate controlled storage that's pretty simple on a flat piece of land with minimal steps or no steps at all? Or are we building a multi-story that has an elevator in it and it's on the side of a hill? We have one project that's right on a pretty steep slope, and it has 13-foot foundation walls under it. I mean, luckily the rents there, and not luckily, I mean, through our underwriting process, we've identified the rents there more than support the costs of building that construction, but it really just depends. So you can't go into a specific market or just see a piece of land and say, yeah, we built in Texas for $50 a square foot. We can build in Oregon for $50 a square foot, on the side of this hill. There's a lot of different things that come into play there. And then, when you start going through the development process and working with the planners, you need to make sure you need to reach out to every single department that's going to be reviewing those plans and understand what their requirements are too. So every jurisdiction that we go into, the fire department is asking for something a little bit different. Which building code are they requiring us to build by here? We have one facility that we purchased through a portfolio in Florida. The building's divided up into 2,500 square foot sections, and there's firewalls and fire doors between those 2,500 square foot sections, and it just gets really, really expensive. So if you don't do the dividers, now you're looking at sprinklering the whole building. There's a lot of things that come into play that can really swing those prices. So,
Which would also add cost.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Cost increases. It really just depends.
So do you two, coming from Seattle and Los Angeles, can match $50 a square foot?
No.
So Lika, what are you building for in Seattle?
So if it's a reconstruction project, then it's anywhere from $85 to $125 a square foot. If I'm doing additions, which is brand new construction on top of an existing project, that's about $180 to $250 a square foot.
And is that just, and for the audience, what type of finishes are you going to for that type of price point?
High-end, like luxury.
Yep. Okay.
These are $1.4 to $2 million homes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And has that changed a lot since pre-COVID? Were you getting, like, what sort of rough 20% increases, 30%
Yeah,
increases?
I mean, I think our cedar went up 30%. And so just like supply costs have gone up so much, I could probably achieve the same thing for like $65 pre-COVID. And now it's just, I mean, even just going from last year to this year, I see like a huge price bump with just, material costs and labor costs.
Right. No, that's what we're seeing across the country. Dave, LA?
Yeah, so we're building for rent multifamily, right? And this is a 3-bedroom, 3.5 bath, like a 1,600 square foot place.
Decent size.
That's going to rent for $4,500 to $5,000 a month gross.
Wow.
So we're more like a B- finish, believe it or not, in LA, right? Like that's actually kind of on that chain. So really, when you're looking at cost per construction, there's two kind of main costs that we look at. There's horizontal cost, right, or soft cost, which is basically everything involved with going through the permitting process, getting through all the architectural, all the planning, and everything else. And then there's the vertical cost, which is once you actually take it out of the ground and start building it. Our vertical costs are about $175 a foot, which is pretty inexpensive, and part of that is achieved because, again, we're kind of replicating the same product over and over and over again. That saves us time because subs get used to building the same thing over and over and over again, which helps to manage some of your labor costs. And then I'd say our horizontal costs or soft costs are about $100 a foot.
So does your horizontal cost include utilities? Or
Yes.
the water, sewer, electricity, gas?
Everything
Okay.
that's not the actual house, we kind of consider our soft costs. So we're at about $270 to $285 a foot for total construction cost once we're done with the project.
Got it. And that actually segues into my next question, which I'll start back with you, is what sort of processes are you implementing in the construction process with your GC? So we've got through the approval process, you got your permit. What are you doing from either negotiating directly with the GC or any processes you can share with the audience in order to mitigate the risk coming into the construction side of it now, like scheduling and profit sharing or anything like that?
So, I think the first thing that we like to do whenever we can is get a fixed bid contract. Whether we're dealing with a contractor, which, even on this product that we're building, we've got an in-house contractor, but even our subs are not in-house people, we're hiring subs. What a fixed bid means is that, look, we want you to build X and give us a price for getting it done, and if it costs you more, that's on you. So it's a fixed bid, and part of that fixed bid is we also want to put a timeline on there, right? So, how much time does it take to build it? Well, it's going to take us 6 weeks. Cool, we'll give you 8. If you do it sooner, you actually get a bonus. If it takes you longer than that, then you're going to penalize for that. And there's a kind of it becomes increasingly more expensive for the sub or the contractor to get things done. So that's one thing is don't ever go on with an open-ended contract. Even a fixed bid contract, especially with COVID, there's a lot of force majeure, which people are kind of implementing with COVID. And look, as a developer, you got to be aware of that. There are some things happening with supply chain and labor costs that really are out of control and out of the, kind of the control of whoever that contractor is. But at least if you set that mentality up front that we want you to do your job for this price in this amount of time, that kind of helps to get that done. One of the things that we also do is we really like to take their process and break it down into 3 to 6 day increments, right? Okay. So instead of saying, look, we're going to pay you this much up front and we're going to pay you this much, halfway through and this much at the end, we actually pay them based on the work they do in a week, right? So we try to tranche whatever their project is into these 3-day like little mini bursts, which, they usually work 6 days a week. So if they can get 2 of those tranches done in a week, they'll get paid for the week, right? So paying them quickly also keeps them motivated, right? And we don't put them through a big approval process. You said you're going to do this, send us the photo that you got it done, and we'll pay you for the week. And that seems to have helped us kind of keep our people involved and on site,
Lika, anything you can add to that or anything different you're doing?
Yeah, mine's not fixed bid at all. It is super open-ended, just to be completely frank, because I want to go into a project and I just want to design the heck out of it. So if it means opening up a wall, adding sliding doors, these mega sconces coming out like on either side of the bed, like I want it all. And so I go in, we do have some idea of how much this project might cost, and then I just up that by another 10%. And then my finishes, again, I just pick some amazing finishes. But also, Seattle goes for that kind of product. There's people that pay a lot of money for good finishes, good turnkey projects, because there's a lot of high net worth individuals that don't have the time to go in and fix stuff up. So they want to move in and move into like a completely move-in ready house, apartment building, office spaces. And so I can afford to do that. But on the flip side, if I'm syndicating a project, and most of my flips are self-funded, but if I'm syndicating a project and I have investors involved, then it is a fixed bid. Like we go in with a certain amount of money that we're going to spend on this building, and we're not going to cross that. I have to like curb my design choices, but that's okay.
That's awesome. And Aaron, what about yourself?
Yeah, so really Spartan Construction Management was created specifically for this reason, right, to reduce risk. So before I hired on, the executive team identified, hey, we've hired a really good GC that's done really well for us, and we've hired a GC that's flooded one of our other buildings, they're behind schedule, and they're over on costs. Like, goodness gracious, we could do that ourselves, right? So we decided to bring this team in-house and really start to build a foundation of a team that can be the best stewards of our investors' money and really reduce our risk. So that's kind of the biggest thing that we do. You know, a couple other things that we do is really focus on relationships. So have relationships with our major suppliers. You know, we just started a big project up in Sandy, Oregon late last year, and we called the supplier direct, even though that's a project that we have a general contractor working on. We called the supplier direct and said, hey, this project's fairly tight, you know, what can you do for us? And they shaved 50 grand right off the bid, even though they were running it through the GC. We maintain a lot of those relationships to help, help reduce the costs, help protect our risk on these projects.
Great.
Yeah, I think it's like if you really want to get good pricing on your second deal, pay them on time for their first deal,
one.
right?
Yeah. Right.
They do the work, you provide the money. That's the
That's right.
relationship, and that's a great way to build a team and consistently over time. It's just making sure you're paying people when you say you're going to pay them.
Build a team and then retain that team.
Yeah. David, you had some good points on the contract too. You know, make sure you have a really solid contract. So as we're building out our construction team, we just recently did a construction contract training for them. So I went through and spent an hour and a half kind of talking through the major terms of a contract and what is Spartan's position on each one of these terms. What are we able to waiver on a little bit? What are some hard no's that we are absolutely not going to waiver on those? You know, consequential damages, limits of liability. You talked about liquidated damages, bonus days. You know, what does that look like in a contract, and how do we protect our investors' investment with us, right?
And if I can add to that, don't sign their contract.
Sign
Make sure
yours,
they sign your contract,
Always.
right?
Yeah.
Have an attorney that specializes in construction that are writing contracts that are, because if it's their contract, the terms are going to be slanted towards them.
Right.
It's your contract, you can slant them towards yourself, but you want them signing your contracts. Invest in the legal fees, right? Versus, oh, you know what? You send me your contract and I'll save you. No. You'll pay for that on the back end. So make sure you're putting together your contracts.
And if you're doing ground up construction, you should be, if you're treating like a business, all legal costs and legal documentation need to be in-house.
Yeah.
So we have 7 minutes left. I do want to, just for the people running mics, I'd love to open up to questions on the floor. But before we do that, I want to quickly go down the line. What are you guys seeing in the next 12 to 24 months in terms of costs, in terms of escalations, in terms of where your business is headed? Everything from planning approval to costs. What's in the crystal ball?
Well, I mean, we're hoping the city gets back. I actually saw something today on my phone that's the CDC just released mask mandates, which is like, you know, hopefully that means the city of LA will let their people get back in the office. So we're hoping that's going to simplify that process. You know, we see what we're doing as a, you know, we've got this generational demand and this undersupplied. So we see there being a really long runway. Even all the stories you're hearing about people leaving California, trust me, as many people are coming back. Our population isn't growing like it used to in the 60s and the 70s, but we're staying pretty flat. You know, my favorite stat about LA is LA added 300,000 jobs in 2021. That's more than Phoenix, it's more than Denver, it's more than Austin, it's more than Salt Lake City combined, right? So we're building property for young millennials that are coming in. We see there being a big runway for that. And I think material costs are just going to get, the supply chain's just going to open up. And I can't wait to hear your talk tomorrow, but we think it's going to get easier. Prices are going to come down. At the same time, debt's going up. So we have to kind of, you know, we don't think the price of our projects are going to change because we may save in supply costs. We may pay more in in debt service, but we still see there being upward pressures on rents, upward pressures on the value of our buildings on the back end when we do decide to sell them. So we're still, still bullish
and
on
figuring
that
it
market.
out, right? Like figuring out a way to add more units to a undersupplied market, I think is really important.
Absolutely.
Lika?
Okay, so in Seattle, Amazon just announced that our average base pay for employees in Seattle is now a minimum of $356,000. And that's a lot of money. And so there's people that can afford to buy a primary residence and then an investment property, and they buy it all cash. And that means there's a horrible demand and no supply. And I think inflation's gonna go up, supply is gonna stay low. We also have crazy rent control and eviction moratoriums. Hopefully that'll ease up this year, but and we can increase rents. But it's just we're gonna have to build more. We're gonna have to, and there's no material. Like, who watched the garage door documentary? There's no garage doors, so how do we keep up?
Well, what you bring up is a very affordability, which we could talk about for a whole 3 hours.
I know.
In these types of markets, but we won't get into that. But the rising cost of wages is putting an upward pressure on places like Seattle and Los Angeles for that affordability. Aaron, bring us home here, mate. What do you see?
Yeah, so we still have, like I said, you have 20 projects in the pipeline that we're pushing through the process in various phases. And I guess when it comes to self-storage, we look at 1, 3, and 5 mile radiuses. So there's a lot of markets out there that are still undersupplied. And our acquisitions team is identifying those markets. We're buying existing facilities in there that have room for expansion, and we're identifying raw land that we can build on. So for us, we're still growing and we're still building.
Awesome. And I'm going to ask before we turn over to questions here, where can people reach you to continue the conversation? They want to ask you more questions about what you do. Where do they go, Dave?
You can send me an email to david@capitalstackinvestments.com, or just go on the Hoover app. I've been reaching out to people on the app. Look up our names. You can find all of our contact information. Send a message if you want to chat more. I'm here all day tomorrow as well. Would love to chat more.
I'm on LinkedIn, Lika Devta, or you can find me on the Hoover.
Hoover?
Yeah, same thing, Hoover app, or Aaron@spartan-investors.com.
We've got 3.5 minutes left. Any questions from the audience? We've got a few stragglers coming in. There's got to be some questions out there. We've got one gentleman down here at the front. We have a mic
over here.
Right here. So hold your question.
Hey guys, great discussion. Lika, this is for you, or anyone can take it. You mentioned the term, or you used the term horrible demand. As suppliers, what is the dark side of having so much unsustainable demand from your perspective? Obviously, like, we want
I
demand.
can't hear
right?
it.
Say it a little louder. It's hard to hear.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I know. Sorry.
Just to repeat, this is for you, Lika. Use the term horrible demand, pertaining to Seattle. So what is the dark side of having so much, unsuppliable demand in your perspective? How does that turn dark? Because we're in the business to supply, and it's, normally you think, oh, this is fantastic, but you use the term horrible demand.
So what's happening is if people can't find their next house to move into, then they're not selling their existing home. We see a lot of people moving to places like Denver and Austin, but they're afraid to sell their Seattle home because if they did want to come back to Seattle, then where would they live? And so it's pushing people out to more tertiary markets. It's pushing people to just keep renting or eventually move out of the city. Like, we have 6 weeks supply of demand or supply of inventory. I think the country's at 1.6 months.
LA County is at 4 weeks of supply. Our average days on market right now for properties is 10 days. So, and this isn't fake demand like we had in 2005 and 2006
Right.
that's being artificially stimulated by banking. This is natural demand. Actually, John's presentation this morning, he did a great job talking about, these millennials that are now getting married, starting families, buying houses. We're just kind of in that phase, and, people are also aging in place, right? That's they're living longer, the people are healthier. So I think we're going to be in a supply-demand imbalance for at least another 3 to 5 years, and that's why we're rushing to build as much as we can.
Okay, one more question.
So I think I could mostly hear you're asking where in LA are we doing these projects? So everything we're doing is in the city of Los Angeles. So not LA County, right? Not Santa Monica, not the South Bay. It's LA proper because, again, it's simple. Our box fits their model. Our area in LA is basically everything from, like the Adams District, which is the 10 up to North Hollywood. Hollywood is ground zero. Any lot we can find in Hollywood, we'll buy it, because we know we're going to get the money back on the rents. We like places that are very walkable, right? Our avatar renter is a, Netflix engineer who's out at LA for the next, 3 to 5 years of his career, and that they're looking to live in a super cool place, rooftop decks, someplace that's walkable. So that's kind of what we try to find places that fit where our avatar would want to live. 5,000.
Well, guys, thank you so much for coming on this incredible panel. I know there's going to be a lot more questions out there, so guys, please reach out to these incredible three after this show. And again, big round of applause for David, Lika, and Aaron.
And Reed.
Thank you.